The story begins in the year 1994, on a film set where no one knew what the future would hold. A new action movie was being made, a film about a bus, a bomb, and a race against time. People thought it would be just another thriller, nothing more. But that movie, Speed, became something far greater. It became the beginning of one of Hollywood's most beloved and timeless partnerships. Imagine this, a young Sandra Bullock sitting quietly in her chair, going over her lines. She was talented, but still new to the spotlight, still unsure how the world would see her. On the other side of the set stood Keanu Reeves, already known for roles that showed strength and mystery, yet carrying himself with a quiet humility that made him different from other actors. He was not loud, not arrogant. Instead, he was gentle, careful with his words, respectful of everyone around him. When their eyes first met, there was no dramatic announcement, no instant romance, but something else, something more rare. It was the start of respect. The hook of this story lies here. People expected explosions, high-speed chases, and loud moments. What they did not expect was the bond forming between two people who would one day be called Hollywood's timeless duo. Behind the flashing cameras, away from the noise, a friendship began. One built not on gossip or fame, but on trust, kindness, and a shared understanding of what it meant to stay human in a world that often forgot humility. But the journey was not simple. On that set, Sandra struggled quietly. She doubted herself, wondering if audiences would accept her. The role was demanding, filled with tension and danger. She had to drive a bus full of screaming passengers in scenes that tested her nerves. During one break, her hands shook slightly, and Keanu noticed. He did not laugh or tease her. Instead, he walked over, offered her water, and whispered, "You're going to be great. Just drive like you've been doing it all your life." That small moment changed something inside Sandra. She realized he was not just her co-star. He was someone who believed in her when she did not believe in herself. Conflict rose in their early days. Critics doubted whether the movie would succeed. Some said Sandra was not ready for a leading role. Others thought Keanu was too quiet, too reserved to carry such an action-packed film. Both of them carried heavy pressure on their shoulders. It was like riding that speeding bus themselves. No turning back, no slowing down. Yet, in the middle of this storm, their bond grew stronger. During long nights of filming, when exhaustion drained everyone, Sandra cracked jokes to lift the crew's spirit, and Keanu smiled in quiet appreciation. When one of the crew members injured his hand, Keanu was the first to rush over, helping him with calmness while others panicked. These acts did not make the news, but they left deep marks in the hearts of those who worked beside them. The suspense deepened as the release date came closer. Would the film be a failure? Would their efforts be forgotten in Hollywood's endless race? Sandra lay awake at night, filled with worry. She wanted to prove herself, to show she belonged. And Keanu, though calm on the outside, wondered if people would accept him in this new role. It was in those quiet fears that their humanity showed. They were not just stars. They were people, carrying doubts like everyone else. Then came the moment of truth. Speed hit the theaters, and the world reacted with shock. The movie exploded with success, pulling both Keanu and Sandra into a new world of fame. But more important than the fame was what the audience saw on screen, the chemistry between them. It was not forced. It was natural, pure, and honest. Viewers felt that these two people cared for each other, even in the middle of chaos. It was this spark, this unspoken bond, that set them apart. Yet success brought its own challenges. As their names spread across the world, rumors began. Hollywood thrives on gossip, and many whispered about their relationship. But Keanu and Sandra stayed silent. They did not feed the noise. Instead, they chose respect. They protected their friendship, knowing that some bonds are stronger when kept private. And this is where the first twist comes in. Most people thought their connection would fade after Speed. They believed it was only a one-time story created by a film's success. But life had other plans. Fate was not done with Keanu and Sandra. Years later, when the world least expected it, they would reunite in a film that was the opposite of Speed. No bombs, no buses, no chaos, just two souls trying to connect across time and distance. A movie called The Lake House. And that story, filled with letters, love, and longing, would remind the world that some connections never die, no matter how much time passes. But before we reach that part, we must walk with them through the struggles, the choices, and the unseen battles they faced. Because their timeless duo was not built in one day. It was built through moments of kindness, acts of humility, and the strength to keep going when life tested them. The suspense of this story lies not just in what happened on screen, but in what happened behind the curtains. Two people, carrying different burdens, finding light in each other's respect. And as we move forward, we will see how their paths, though separate, kept finding ways to cross, creating a story that continues to inspire even today. This was only the beginning. The bus ride was over, but the journey of Keanu and Sandra had only just begun. The first movie had ended. The cameras were packed away and the echoes of explosions and bus engines slowly faded into silence. But what remained alive was something invisible, an unspoken thread between Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock. Audiences thought they had only seen two actors doing their jobs. In reality, something deeper had begun. Here is where the second chapter of their journey hooks us in. Imagine standing at the edge of success, with the world suddenly looking at you differently. People cheer, magazines write your name, yet inside you feel strangely empty, asking yourself, do they see the real me, or just the character I played? Both Keanu and Sandra wrestled with this same question after Speed. For Sandra, life suddenly felt louder than before. Phone calls never stopped. Interviews filled her days, and strangers began judging her smile, her clothes, even her laugh. She was grateful, yes, but part of her longed for the quiet comfort she had known before fame. During one interview, when asked about her experience filming Speed, she paused. Instead of giving a rehearsed line, she simply said, "Keanu made me feel safe." Those words, honest and gentle, revealed what the cameras had not shown, the bond that had carried her through the storm of self-doubt. Keanu, meanwhile, walked through the chaos with his usual calmness. He had never been the type to chase fame. His joy came from doing the work, not from the lights that followed. Still, he could not ignore what Speed had brought, a heavy responsibility. Hollywood wanted him to become a larger-than-life action hero, but deep inside, Keanu carried something softer, a desire to tell stories that spoke about humanity, not just explosions. He feared being trapped in one image forever, and in that fear, he quietly wondered if Sandra felt the same weight on her shoulders. The conflict grew quietly. Their schedules separated them, each running into different projects, different challenges, and different circles of life. Hollywood has a cruel way of pulling people apart. New roles, endless travel, constant attention. Many friendships born on sets simply dissolve into memory. But here is where the twist begins. Even as years passed, and even as they worked on different films, Keanu and Sandra carried a quiet respect for each other, a respect so strong that it refused to fade. There were stories whispered among crew members. One recalled how, at a Hollywood party, Sandra stood awkwardly in a corner, overwhelmed by the crowd. Most actors were busy chasing attention, laughing loudly, making themselves seen. Keanu, noticing her discomfort, walked over without fanfare. He did not pull her into the spotlight. Instead, he asked if she wanted to step outside for some air. They sat quietly on a balcony, sharing nothing more than a laugh about the absurdity of it all. That simple act, unnoticed by the cameras, showed the true nature of their bond. No need for headlines, no need for performance, just kindness. Another moment came when Sandra bought her first small house after Speed. She admitted years later that she could not even open a bottle of champagne to celebrate because her hands were shaking. A friend had brought Keanu along to visit. Instead of making a grand toast, he simply grabbed tools from the kitchen and fixed a broken shelf in her hallway. "This will make the house feel stronger," he said with a small smile. Imagine that. Hollywood's rising star choosing to fix a shelf instead of chasing attention. It left Sandra with a memory she would never forget. But here is where suspense deepens. While the outside world dreamed of them as a couple, the reality was different. They never stepped into romance. And that became the greatest mystery to fans. Why not? They had chemistry, trust, and respect. Yet both chose silence. Sandra once admitted that perhaps they did not date because they were too respectful of each other. Keanu, too, when asked years later, confessed he did not want to risk losing the friendship that meant so much. Their humility became the hook that kept people talking. Hollywood thrives on scandal, but with Keanu and Sandra, there was none. No fights, no betrayals, no tabloid wars. Instead, there was patience, and sometimes, patience itself creates more suspense than chaos ever could. Life, however, tested them in different ways. Keanu faced personal tragedies that weighed on him heavily. The loss of loved ones carved a quiet pain into his heart. He became more withdrawn, more private, a man walking through grief while the world still demanded his presence. Sandra, too, went through heartbreaks of her own. Relationships failed. Trust was broken, and she often wondered if happiness would ever last. These struggles were never hidden completely from the world. But behind the curtain, what mattered was this. Both of them held on to resilience. They did not let bitterness define them. They chose kindness, even when pain could have hardened them. And just when the world thought their story was over, just a memory from the Speed days, fate decided to intervene again. The year was 2006, and a script was moving quietly across Hollywood. A love story, but not an ordinary one. It was about two people living in the same house at different times, writing letters to each other across the years. The idea was strange, almost too gentle for an industry chasing explosions and big profits. Yet, the director believed it needed actors who could make the impossible feel real. Someone suggested Sandra. Someone else suggested Keanu. When the names came together, the room fell silent. It felt like destiny calling them back. Audiences had not seen them together in over a decade. Many thought the magic of Speed could never be repeated. But destiny had other plans. And when Sandra received the script, her first thought was, if Keanu is in, I'm in too. This was not just a reunion. It was proof that some bonds, even when paused by time, never truly break. So the hook for what comes next is clear. After 12 long years, after separate journeys of pain and triumph, Keanu and Sandra were about to step back into each other's world. And this time, there would be no bus, no bombs, no chaos. Only letters, silence, and the raw power of connection. But as we will see in the next part, the lake house would not only test their on-screen chemistry again, it would also reveal something deeper. How two people who had carried the weight of the world on their shoulders could still find light in the gentlest of stories. 12 years had passed since the runaway bus of Speed roared through theaters. 12 years of separate journeys, private battles, and countless projects. Yet, when Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock found themselves reunited for the lake house, it felt less like a comeback and more like the continuation of a story that had been waiting in silence. Here is the hook that draws us in. Imagine two people who once faced chaos side by side, now meeting again, not in a storm of explosions, but in the calm of letters passed across time. What would it reveal about them? Could the bond that had once carried fire and danger also carry tenderness and longing? The filming began quietly, far from the noise of Speed. Instead of buses and city streets, there was a glass lake house surrounded by still water and endless sky. The story itself was strange. A man and a woman living in the same house, 2 years apart, writing to each other through a mailbox that defied time. Many doubted if audiences would accept it. After all, Hollywood often demands the loud and the flashy. But Keanu and Sandra believed in it. Perhaps because in some way it mirrored their own journey. Two people separated by time and distance, yet always connected by something deeper. During the first table reading, when Keanu spoke the words of his character, Alex, and Sandra answered as Kate. Something unexpected happened. The room grew quiet. Even the director paused. It was as if the years had melted away, as if their voices had been waiting for each other all along. The crew whispered later that day, "It doesn't feel like acting. It feels like they're really speaking to each other." But here lies the first twist. Unlike Speed, where the tension came from survival and danger, the lake house asked for vulnerability. It demanded silence, patience, and the courage to let emotions linger. Sandra admitted in an interview that she feared audiences might not understand. "It's not about action," she said. "It's about waiting, about believing in something you cannot see." In that fear once again, Keanu became her anchor. He reminded her gently, "Sometimes the quietest stories last the longest." The behind-the-scenes moments added layers of humanity to their reunion. One day, the glass house set grew unbearably hot under the sun, and many crew members were exhausted. Instead of retreating to their air-conditioned trailers, both Keanu and Sandra stayed with the team. Keanu handed out bottles of water while Sandra told stories to keep spirits light. It reminded the crew of why these two were different, not stars above everyone else, but people walking side by side with those who worked behind the cameras. Yet the suspense of their reunion was not only about the movie. The world outside was watching closely. Fans speculated endlessly. Had they stayed friends all these years? Did they still share that same spark? Every interview became a puzzle for people to decode. When asked if they had ever dated, Sandra laughed softly and confessed she had once had a crush on Keanu. Audiences erupted. Years later, Keanu would reveal that he, too, had liked her back during Speed. But at the time, neither had confessed. Imagine the suspense. Two people, both holding the same quiet affection, yet neither daring to cross the line out of respect for their friendship. The conflict of the lake house mirrored their real lives. In the movie, their characters were separated by time, longing for a connection that seemed impossible. In reality, Keanu and Sandra had been separated by years of life, yet somehow still found themselves drawn together, their bond untouched by distance. It was almost poetic, art imitating life. Another unique hook lay in how they treated each other on set. Unlike many Hollywood reunions, there was no arrogance, no competition. Instead, there was patience. Sandra once shared that when she stumbled over a line, Keanu would wait quietly, never rushing her, never showing frustration. "He gives you space to find your way," she said. And Keanu, when asked about Sandra, simply smiled and said, "She brings out the light in people." Still, not everything was smooth. The movie faced challenges. Critics were unsure if such a quiet, emotional story could succeed. The studio worried about box office numbers. Pressure built again, just like it had during Speed. Sandra confessed privately to a friend that she feared letting people down. But here comes another twist. Instead of running from the pressure, both she and Keanu leaned into it with humility. They reminded themselves why they had chosen the project, not for fame, not for money, but because it spoke to something rare in Hollywood. It spoke to belief in unseen connections. When The Lake House finally released, reactions were divided. Some critics dismissed it as too slow, too dreamlike, but audiences felt something different. Letters poured in, not to the studio, but directly to Sandra and Keanu. People shared stories of lost love, long-distance relationships, and how the movie gave them hope that true connection could survive even when time itself tried to stand in the way. One fan wrote, "You made me believe that patience is love." Another said, "Your movie reminded me that waiting is not weakness, it is strength. This is where the emotional depth strikes hardest." The film may not have broken records like Speed, but it touched hearts in ways that explosions never could. And once again, the magic was not just in the script, it was in the bond between Keanu and Sandra. People saw honesty in their eyes, truth in their silences. It was not acting alone. It was something real. And here is the cliffhanger for what comes next. Many thought The Lake House would be the last time Keanu and Sandra stood together on screen. But destiny, as always, had its own quiet plans. Their story was no longer just about movies. It was about how two people, through kindness and humility, became symbols of something larger than Hollywood. Symbols of respect, resilience, and timeless connection. As the cameras closed on The Lake House, one thing became clear: their journey was far from over. When The Lake House ended, audiences walked out with mixed feelings. Some critics dismissed it as too quiet, too dreamlike. But for many, it was unforgettable. Not because of special effects, not because of action, but because Keanu and Sandra had once again proven that connection is stronger than spectacle. The movie faded from theaters, but the whispers about their bond only grew louder. Here is the hook that grabs us now. Imagine two people who created magic twice, yet fate kept pulling them apart. Every reunion felt like destiny, but every separation raised a question. Why does the world never let them stay together longer? After the lake house, Sandra stepped into a new chapter of her life. She chased roles that challenged her in different ways. She explored comedy, drama, even deep emotional films that tested her strength as an actress. She wanted to grow beyond the image of the bright, smiling heroine. But with growth came conflict. Hollywood is quick to put people in boxes, and many thought she could only do light-hearted roles. She fought hard against those chains, proving herself again and again. Keanu, too, entered a storm of choices. Some of his films during this period struggled, others soared. But what defined him was not the projects. It was his resilience. He carried grief from personal tragedies, yet he never let the pain turn him bitter. He chose to keep moving forward quietly, focusing on his craft. People often said Keanu is mysterious, but the truth was simpler. He was just humble. He did not need to shout his story. He let his work speak instead. But here lies the first twist. Even while they lived different lives, both Keanu and Sandra carried memories of their time together. In interviews, their names always seemed to find each other. A journalist once asked Sandra, "Who was the best co-star you've ever had?" Without hesitation, she smiled and said, "Keanu Reeves." Years later, in another interview, when Keanu was asked which actress he admired most, he replied, "Sandra Bullock. She is one of the best." These small acknowledgments were like sparks, reminding fans that the flame had never gone out. The suspense deepened because Hollywood noticed it too. Producers whispered about pairing them again. Scripts floated across tables. Some romantic comedies, some dramas. Even an idea for a Speed sequel that would bring Jack and Annie back together. But nothing ever lined up. Timing betrayed them. Either Keanu was tied to another project, or Sandra was already filming, or the scripts were not good enough. Fans grew restless, asking the same question over and over, why won't they reunite? And then came another hook, one that touched hearts around the world. In 2018, Sandra appeared on a talk show. Laughing shyly, she admitted she had once had a crush on Keanu during Speed. She joked that she thought he never liked her back, so she kept it to herself. The audience gasped, laughed, and cheered. Little did she know that just a few months later, Keanu would appear on the same show and reveal the truth. When asked about Sandra's confession, he smiled softly and said, "She didn't know? I had a crush on her too." The world exploded with emotion. Two people who had silently admired each other for decades, finally admitting the truth years later. Yet by then it was too late for romance. They had built their lives, chosen different paths, and decided that friendship was the treasure worth protecting. This twist stunned audiences. How could two people so perfect together never cross that line? And the answer was as humbling as it was powerful. Respect. They respected each other too much to risk losing what they already had. Another emotional moment came when Sandra described Keanu's kindness outside of films. She told a story about him showing up at her house with champagne and truffles just to celebrate her finishing a role. He didn't announce it, didn't turn it into a grand gesture. He simply appeared, carrying small joys, reminding her that he cared. She said, "That's Keanu. He shows up in ways that matter." The suspense of their bond became bigger than any movie. Fans started calling them Hollywood's timeless duo, not because of romance, but because of the rare example they set. In a world of gossip, scandals, and broken friendships, they showed that respect and kindness could last longer than anything else. But conflict still played its part. People online debated constantly. Should they reunite on screen? Should they finally admit they belonged together? Some argued that Hollywood had failed by not giving them more films. Others believed their story was more powerful because it remained unfinished, like a letter waiting in a mailbox that never closes. And here lies the hidden twist. While fans dreamed of more movies, Keanu and Sandra seemed content with something greater. They did not measure their bond by screen time. Instead, they measured it in trust, in small gestures, in knowing that no matter how much time passed, they could always rely on each other. Years rolled on. Keanu became the face of resilience again with his powerful comeback in the John Wick series, reminding the world that humility and strength can walk hand in hand. Sandra won an Academy Award for The Blind Side, proving her depth as an actress. Their paths were separate, yet in every success and every struggle, their names still echoed together in the hearts of fans. And so, Part 4 closes with this powerful hook. After all the confessions, after all the near misses, after all the years of silence and respect, fans still ask, will destiny give us one last chapter? Is there another story waiting for them? Because the greatest suspense of all is not whether they once had a crush or whether they will reunite, but whether the world will one day see Keanu and Sandra together again, not just in memory, but in a new story yet to be written. Time has a way of testing bonds. Some fade, some break, but the rare ones only grow stronger in silence. And this is the hook that carries us into the next chapter. What happens when two people never lose respect for each other, even when the world keeps demanding more? After the lake house and years of unspoken admiration, the world continued to chase answers about Keanu and Sandra. People saw their kindness, their honesty, and their humility, and they wanted more. Not just more movies, but more of them. The audience wanted a love story in real life, yet the truth was both simpler and more powerful. They had chosen something rarer than romance. They had chosen a friendship that did not need headlines to survive. But here lies the first suspense of this part. Hollywood was not ready to let go. Again and again, scripts were written with their names scribbled in the margins. Producers dreamed of putting them back together on screen. Fans filled forums with wishes. A new drama, a sequel to Speed, even a quiet film about life after fame. Each rumor spread like wildfire, yet none came true. And every time a project slipped away, the mystery deepened. Why not? Behind closed doors, the truth was more complex. Both Keanu and Sandra had their own paths, their own burdens. Sandra took time away from acting to focus on her children, choosing motherhood over endless scripts. Keanu threw himself into work but also carried his private battles, protecting his peace with quiet resilience. The timing never worked, and Hollywood's noise only made it harder. But here is another hook that pulled fans back in. Those rare, almost accidental reunions outside of films. Sometimes it was a red carpet where Sandra and Keanu crossed paths and embraced warmly. Sometimes it was an interview where one praised the other without being asked. Those small glimpses became gold for fans, who replayed them endlessly, searching for meaning in every smile and every laugh. One unforgettable moment came when Sandra spoke about Keanu in an interview. She described how he had once shown up at her house with flowers and champagne, celebrating her achievements quietly, without cameras. "He is the guy who never forgets to make you feel valued," she said. Her voice cracked with emotion. That story traveled across the world, reminding people that the truest connections are not measured by headlines, but by the moments no one sees. Keanu, too, revealed his admiration in his own way. When asked about Sandra, he did not give long speeches. Instead, he gave something more powerful, silence, followed by a soft smile, then a few words. "She's a good person. She makes everything better." It was simple, but it carried more weight than any dramatic declaration. And here lies the twist. Fans realized their story was not about romance denied. It was about a bond that had become untouchable. In a world filled with broken promises, here were two people who had never betrayed each other, never spoken badly about each other, never let jealousy or fame poison their respect. And that became something even stronger than any fictional love story. It became real inspiration. But suspense still lingered. During this time, Hollywood went through change after change. New stars rose, trends shifted, but the fascination with Keanu and Sandra never dimmed. Online, fans created petitions demanding their reunion. Some even wrote fan scripts and shared them, imagining how another movie could look. One popular idea placed them as older versions of their Speed characters, meeting years later, still bound by survival and memory. Another fan idea imagined a sequel to The Lake House, where their letters would return after decades. Every rumor sparked hope, then disappointment when nothing happened. And every disappointment only made their bond more mythical. People began calling them the timeless duo who never needed more movies to prove their magic. But here is the unique hook. Life itself became their greatest film. Every act of kindness, every small gesture, every respectful silence was like a scene that fans carried in their hearts. When Sandra suffered personal heartbreaks, Keanu was quietly supportive. When Keanu faced moments of grief, Sandra's words of admiration reminded people he was not walking alone. They became symbols of resilience, showing the world that life can break you and still leave you kind. One story reveals this more than anything else. A close friend once shared that when Sandra lost someone important, Keanu wrote her a handwritten note. No headlines, no public statement, just a quiet letter reminding her that strength is not about pretending to be fine, but about allowing yourself to heal. That note, though private, became a symbol of who Keanu was, and Sandra, in turn, once sent flowers to Keanu on his birthday, even when they had not spoken for months, just to remind him that he mattered. Their connection had become bigger than Hollywood. It had become a lesson about life itself, that respect is stronger than romance, that kindness lasts longer than fame, and that humility will always outshine noise. And so, as we move to the end of this chapter, we stand at a powerful question. If fate brought them together twice already, could it happen again? Or is the true magic of their story the fact that it never fully completes, always leaving us waiting, always leaving us wondering? Because here lies the deepest suspense of all, the belief that maybe one day, when no one expects it, Keanu and Sandra will step into a story together again, proving once more that timeless duos never really fade. Every great story needs an ending. But with Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock, the truth is their story feels endless. It is not bound by film reels or ticket sales. It exists in moments, in gestures, in the quiet respect that has lasted decades. And this is the hook of our final part. What do you call a connection that never fades, even when time keeps moving forward? After all the years, after Speed lit the world on fire, after the lake house whispered of love across time, Keanu and Sandra continued their journeys apart. Both found success, both faced pain, and both kept growing into people the world admired, not only for talent, but for humanity. Sandra raised her children with fierce love, stepping away from Hollywood when they needed her most. Keanu continued to choose projects that spoke to resilience and honor, showing the world that humility can live even in the spotlight. Yet, even as their lives moved separately, their names never stopped walking side by side. At award shows, interviewers still asked about each other. At fan gatherings, people still whispered, "Will they ever reunite?" It became a story larger than Hollywood itself, a story about two souls who somehow carried each other without needing to hold hands. But here lies the twist of the final chapter. People often wait for grand endings, for big reveals, for the kind of romance that fills headlines. But Keanu and Sandra gave the world something rarer. They showed that friendship can be as eternal as love. That kindness can leave a bigger legacy than fame, and that respect can be the strongest bond of all. Imagine this. At a private charity event years later, Keanu and Sandra meet again. No flashing cameras, no scripted moments. Just two old friends sharing quiet laughter at a corner table. Someone who was there recalled that they looked like no time had passed at all. Sandra leaned in, telling a story that made Keanu throw his head back in laughter. Keanu, in return, listened to her with full attention, the way he always had. It was not a scene for the screen. It was real life. And that is where the lesson rests. Hollywood often sells the idea that every story needs a dramatic kiss, a final embrace. But sometimes the most powerful endings are not endings at all. They are continuations, connections that simply keep existing, quietly shaping lives without ever demanding the spotlight. Sandra once said in an interview, "I think we'll always be in each other's lives. It just might not be in the way people expect." Keanu echoed this in his own words when asked about her. "She's a friend forever. I'll always be grateful." The suspense of their bond has become its own kind of movie, one without scripts, one without directors, one written only by time. Fans may always wonder, will there be another film? Will destiny give us one more chance to see them together on screen? But perhaps that question is not the point. Perhaps the point is that their story has already given us more than a movie ever could. Because here is the final reveal. Their true legacy is not in the roles they played, but in the example they set. They showed that you can succeed without arrogance, that you can carry heartbreak without losing kindness, that you can stand in the spotlight without forgetting humility. And together, they proved that connection, whether called friendship, respect, or timeless partnership, can outlast even the brightest lights of Hollywood. So, as we close this journey, we are left with silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of awe. Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock may never give us the ending we think we want, but what they have given is far more rare. The belief that some bonds are eternal, untouched by time, untouched by distance, untouched by anything the world can throw their way. And maybe, just maybe, that is the most timeless story of all.